I've had an affection for swamps for as long as I can remember. There's just something mysterious about them that draws me to them. Add to that the abundance of wildlife that lives in a good swamp, and it becomes almost magical to me. I've visited a good number of swamps over the last 6 decades. This is the story of one of those swamps. In my 20s, I was working on a construction crew out in a pretty remote location. A lot of the local folks thought we were building something sinister behind our miles of fences with armed guards patrolling, but I assure you we were not. The particular crew that I was assigned to worked closely with the Forestry Commission and the USGS, that's the United States Geological Survey. We were often tasked with work that took us outside the construction area in order to keep tabs on not only the impact of the construction to the immediate area, but the surrounding areas as well. Our crew would sometimes load up in our big SUV and make our way through the forest to get our task for the day completed. One route we often took had us going right beside a magnificent swamp. I'll never forget how excited I got the day we saw a big swamp cat sunning on a rock in the middle of the swamp. That image is forever burned into my brain. I began talking about coming back to explore the swamp on my days off. My co-workers that were local residents immediately told me I did not want to do that. They told me stories of a shadow creature that lived in that swamp, and it had ill intentions towards the living. Now, I didn't know if they were just messing with me or what, but one rainy, misty morning, as we made our way past the swamp, there was a very high level of creepiness that safely kept me out of there for then. Time passed, I moved on to other jobs, life happened, and years went by, but I never forgot about that swamp and that majestic cat laying there. I still lived about 40 miles from the place, and I occasionally drove through the area on the main road, not through the woods. It always called to me when I went by, but I never entered the forest that leads down to the swamp. Well, not until a couple of years ago. I think you're supposed to be fearless and stupid when you're young, and more cautious and wise as you age. I guess I forgot to read the chapter of the manual. I find I'm much less cautious in such matters these days. So I eventually found myself driving back up there and looking for a way to explore the swamp. I looked at satellite maps, trail maps, I drove around aimlessly, and I finally had a plan of attack. My goal? I wanted to go deep into the swamp and find out its secrets. What animals were hiding in there? Were there possibly any historical artifacts somewhere waiting for me to find? Hopefully, I would soon find out. The day finally arrived. I dropped some snacks in my little day pack, grabbed a couple of water bottles, and pointed the truck north. About 40 miles after leaving home, I found myself leaving the paved roads behind. I started out on a seldom used 2-track road through rocks and creeks. Soon enough, I was more or less just bulldozing my way deeper and deeper into the woods. When I felt like I was as close as I could get in the vehicle, I parked the truck and began my exploration on foot. I'd stopped the truck just shy of something like a peat bog. I was very happy I decided to wear my muck boots that day. I made my way through a thicket of vines and various bramble, and then things opened up to the jewel that I wanted to find. A large, glorious swamp with a mist floating just above the surface. I paused for a moment just to take it all in. The smell was something like fresh turned earth with a bit of spiciness to it. The air was alive with sounds, birds, insects, the occasional bark of a squirrel, or something jumping in the water. There were sunbeams raining down through the trees. This place was truly incredible. Swamps are magical places full of wonder. Yes, they can be a little frightening, but they are also breathtaking. While there was no actual trail here, you could see little paths that were probably made by the local wildlife. In many places it would open up near the edge of the stagnant brown water, allowing me to see further into the surrounding area. I really had no true agenda other than to just explore, maybe get some nice photos. I slowly and quietly made my way deeper and deeper into the swamp, the sounds of the wildlife coming from every direction. I was walking along, enjoying myself, when out of the corner of my eye I saw something that just didn't quite fit in. I stopped and looked a little closer. There, about 50 yards from me, I spotted a shape by the edge of the water. It was a man, squatting down with his back to me. I froze in my tracks. I'm pretty sure I stopped breathing for a minute. Slowly, the man rose. He turned and locked eyes with me. He was a tall, slender man, wearing faded clothes and something like a wide-brimmed fedora hat. Once he was fully turned and facing me, he raised his arm and pointed in my direction. He began saying something, and while I didn't understand a word he said, I clearly understood his meaning. I needed to go back to where I came from. I didn't need to be told twice either. I turned to head back as he continued to shout at me in whatever swamp language that was. And now I've seen way too many horror movies to just take off running through the woods, but I did walk pretty fast. Still following what I thought to be a wildlife trail, I was no longer sure about that. I crested a small hill, and a second figure stepped out from behind a large tree. He spoke in the same gibberish language at first, and then, strangely, I could understand him clearly. At least I think. Whatever it was, I could understand him. He told me I must leave. I literally shouted back that I was trying to. He then looked back towards the darkening swamp and said with a horrified look, "They are coming." I turned to look back, and two things happened. One, all the sounds of the swamp suddenly stopped. The birds, the insects, the frogs, the wind in the trees, all of it just stopped. Then, when I turned around, the guy was gone. Vanished. Poof. At this point, I threw caution to the wind and ran for all I was worth. It was then that I heard a sound. It was something like a howl, followed by something splashing in the swamp. As I ran, I could clearly hear something in the swamp, headed in my direction. My heart sank. I remember thinking, this is it. The splashing stopped, and I could hear something crashing through the brush, coming my way. An occasional howl or a growl or some noise that I can't really explain, causing me to run even faster. Then, about 30 yards away, I caught a glimpse of sunfire red pearl paint through the trees. I ran for all I was worth while fishing my keys out of my pocket. I made it to the truck alive, fired it up, and gave it all she had getting out of there. I was on autopilot as I sped through the woods. Once on pavement, it was still a 30-minute drive to the nearest store where there were lights. I arrived at the store and just sat there shaking for a minute. When I got myself composed enough to step in and grab a soft drink, I stepped out of the truck and turned to go inside the store. That's when I saw some kind of a stick figure drawn in mud on the tailgate of my truck.